The shift did not happen on the battlefield or in the stock market. It happened in the quiet efficiency of 100,000 new factory floors, distribution centers, and geriatric care facilities. In 2026, the global robotics industry is undergoing a controlled detonation, a unified, capital-intensive expansion that will not just change jobs, but fundamentally rewire the balance of economic power within a single generation. The immediate headline is the 40% surge in industrial and service robot deployment announced by the East-West Robotics Consensus, a previously unthinkable coordinated maneuver by rival economic blocs. But the deeper question isn't about the hardware, it's about the hidden system of labor leverage. For centuries, national strength was measured in manpower and resource control. Now, it is measured in the velocity of automation. The world is witnessing a silent geopolitical arms race where the weapon is not a missile, but the total elimination of human latency in the supply chain. This is not simple technological progress. It is a calculated structural adjustment to the global economy, designed to achieve maximum output independence. This move isn't a reaction to a crisis. It is an economic preemption of all future crises. A surprising parallel emerges from the early 20th century, specifically the concept of the dreadnought in naval history. The moment Britain built the first all-big gun battleship, it rendered every other ship in the world obsolete overnight, triggering a frantic, destabilizing naval arms race. The new generation of generalized AI-integrated robots, cheaper, smarter, and more adaptable, is the dreadnought of the modern labor force. They don't just replace one type of worker. They rewrite the entire architecture of production. Consider this. Projections now show that by 2030, the median cost of an automated warehouse task will drop to 8 cents, compared to over $2.50 for human labor, creating an undeniable, structural economic incentive for rapid adoption that no government can halt. The tension escalates as nations that lag behind face not just competitive disadvantage, but a permanent structural dependency on the automated leaders. To the average person, this sounds like abstract economics, but think of it through the lens of behavioral finance, the endowment effect. For decades, your professional value, your endowment, was based on skills that required physical presence, repetition, and learned dexterity. The robotics push is suddenly making that endowment illiquid, devaluing it on the global market, triggering a massive, quiet psychological shock. The job isn't going away slowly. The economic relevance of the skill is vanishing instantly. This isn't just a concern for factory workers. It's coming for logistics, data entry, and even basic legal services. It's an issue of economic dignity, forcing a brutal reckoning with the core question, what is the unique, unautomatable value of human effort? The world is reacting with a predictable blend of market euphoria and existential anxiety. But the noise is obscuring the central play. This coordinated push is not just about making things faster, it's about achieving economic invulnerability. And as the first wave of automated supply chains locks into place, a single critical vulnerability remains: the very concept of the universal human wage. The economic consensus wasn't reached through goodwill or shared ideals. It was reached through the chilling mathematics of resource optimization, where a global supply chain is only as strong as its most expensive and most variable component, human labor. The 2026 robotics push is the formal declaration that variability is no longer tolerable. The hidden mechanics lie in a geopolitical arbitrage known as the automation deficit. Developed nations have aging populations and high wages. Emerging nations have large, young populations, but rapidly rising wages and increasing social instability. Robotics offers a clean solution to both. For the West, it's a productivity fountain that offsets demographic decline. For the East, it's a way to leapfrog the middle-income trap without relying on politically volatile labor management. The system behind the news is a calculated decoupling of national productivity from national demographics. This isn't about maximizing profit, it's about minimizing risk, specifically the risk of a global labor shock, a pandemic-style disruption, or geopolitical trade weaponization. The AI-integrated robot is, first and foremost, a non-volatile national asset. The part nobody expected is the quiet policy coordination around data standardization. Robotics is worthless without massive, clean data flows. Historically, competing nations would never share proprietary industrial data, but leaked documents show a series of bilateral automation accords focused purely on establishing uniform safety, communication, and training protocols for the next generation of general-purpose robots. Why? Because the network effect of a truly interoperable global automation backbone is so vast, so essential to maintaining competitive parity, that it temporarily supersedes geopolitical animosity. This surprising connection reveals that the goal is not to win the current phase of the Industrial Revolution, but to ensure one's nation is a permanent stakeholder in the coming phase of the robotic network, a collective self-preservation mechanism that has never been seen on this scale. The psychology of institutions involved is one of hyper-rational self-interest. Imagine a major shipping corporation that sees the data. An automated port operates 24/7 with 99.9% uptime for 1/10 the cost. The choice isn't between efficiency and jobs. The choice is between survival and extinction. It becomes a prisoner's dilemma on a global scale. Every major player must automate now because the penalty for being the last to move is market death. For the individual, this means the traditional employer-employee social contract, which promised stability in exchange for loyalty and labor, is being quietly shredded. The new contract is between the worker and the perpetual motion of technological change, where the only currency is continuous, radical upskilling. The stakes are not just economic, they are societal. The race to automate is a race to own the next era of industrial output. But this shift leaves a critical void, a massive, unaddressed problem of scale and purpose. The question for the automated future is not what will robots do, but rather, what will all the people do? And to understand the answer, we must first look at the quiet, historical lesson other nations are desperately trying to internalize. While the manufacturing giants accelerate, the developing world watches with a historical dread. This 2026 robotics surge threatens to eliminate the final stepping stone of economic ascent, the utilization of cheap, abundant labor as a temporary engine for industrialization. The global context is the recreation of the geographic wealth divide. For the last 70 years, a nation could reliably pull itself out of poverty by becoming the world's factory floor. This is the Asian miracle model. The new wave of automation cancels this model entirely. Why build a factory in a developing nation when an automated factory on your home soil is cheaper, faster, and faces zero political instability? The system hidden behind this is the creation of automation sanctuaries, economies that can fully repatriate their supply chains, making geography irrelevant for production. This fundamentally restructures geopolitics. The ability to manufacture, not the location of manufacturing, becomes the ultimate source of power. The historical parallel is stark and provides a crucial, it gets deeper insight. The enclosure movement of 18th century England. Private landowners fenced off common land, displacing rural populations and forcing them into urban centers to become industrial labor. The new enclosure is the fencing off of efficient production by robotic systems. It displaces not rural workers, but the global middle class. But here's the deeper mechanism. Behavioral economics suggests that displaced workers don't immediately retrain. They experience status quo bias. They cling to the hope that their old job, their old identity, will return. This institutional inertia, this refusal to accept the permanence of the shift, is the single greatest brake on social adjustment, creating a powerful, volatile disconnect between technological reality and human expectation. How other markets view this development is through the lens of structural irrelevance. Small, service-based economies that focused on tourism or bespoke finance are relatively insulated. But the vast majority of middle-tier industrial economies, those reliant on exports of complex but repeatable goods, face an unprecedented threat of sudden, systemic obsolescence. Their governments face a policy choice not seen since the Great Depression: massive debt-fueled social intervention to support a suddenly irrelevant labor force, or a catastrophic failure of the social safety net. This is where power structures truly shift. The ability to manage mass redundancy becomes the new metric of national governance stability. It gets deeper because the quiet move is not the deployment of the robots themselves, but the deployment of an entirely new form of national accounting. The wealth generated by this hyper-efficiency is enormous, yet it accrues to a vanishingly small fraction of the population. This has forced a small cohort of powerful nations to pilot a radical solution, a policy tool so controversial, so historically charged, that the media avoids discussing it entirely. It is the final, inevitable countermeasure to a fully automated world. The most critical impact is not on the factory floor, but at the kitchen table. The robotic surge creates a profound divergence. A world of unprecedented material abundance coexisting with a crisis of existential scarcity for the average wage earner. What it means for families and workers is a quiet erosion of the two pillars of middle-class stability: predictable income and predictable upward mobility. The media focuses on the jobs lost to a robot, but the real shift is the wage compression of the jobs that remain. The human worker becomes a highly flexible, short-term, on-demand component used to cover the gaps where automation is not yet cost-effective. This structural shift moves income from stable salaries to volatile gig work, creating a massive instability that traditional welfare systems are simply not built to handle. The system is no longer organized around full employment, it is optimized for full efficiency. The part the media isn't discussing is the simultaneous, quiet testing of sovereign wealth funds for human capital, SWFHC, in several leading automation nations. Recognizing that the immense productivity gains will not flow through wages, these governments are actively exploring mechanisms to capture a slice of the robotic output, a tax on automation velocity, and distribute it as a social dividend. This is a pattern interruption of historical magnitude, as it suggests the state is effectively becoming a shareholder on behalf of the populace in the industrial output itself. This is the only rational counterpolicy to a world where production and labor are decoupled. The surprising fact is that this isn't a utopian idea, it's a pragmatic necessity to prevent social collapse. The real-world implication for global trends is a crisis of purpose. For the first time in history, the problem is not about generating enough wealth, but about justifying the expenditure of human time. Social psychology informs us that the loss of meaningful work is profoundly destabilizing. It's not just about the money, it's about the societal narrative. The global trends now pivot from maximizing employment to maximizing engagement, finding non-market mechanisms for human validation and contribution, a shift that is as philosophically profound as it is economically disruptive. Nations that solve the purpose paradox will be the most stable. Those that don't will face internal turbulence, regardless of their GDP. The 2026 robotics push is not merely a technological story. It is the beginning of the post-labor economy, a period that will redefine governance, wealth, and the very meaning of human value. Because while the world is focused on the robots assembling cars and loading ships, the real transformation is already unfolding, quietly and in the place no one expects: the complete digital re-architecture of the global money supply itself.